Welcome back. This is part 2 of the video lecture series on law in India. In part 1, we have got a sense of what is India and some idea of Indian history with its impact on Indian law. Let me now give you an overview of some characteristic elements of the current Indian legal system. The Republic of India features a Western-style constitutional law framework. Its constitution provides for a parliamentary government system and an independent judiciary. It also contains a catalogue of fundamental rights. All of this is inspired by Western models. Let's have a look at some provisions. We can easily recognize the Western provenance of Indian constitutional law already in the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble emphasizes the sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic character of the Republic, and it adds a number of principles, namely justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, all of which repeats, of course, the ideals of European Enlightenment philosophy and the motto of the French Revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternité, which is complemented by justice to indicate a more social orientation. Part 3 of the Constitution contains fundamental rights. Article 14 states the principle of the right to equality before the law, and Articles 15 and 16 add an explicit prohibition of discrimination in a number of contexts. According to Article 15, the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place or birth or any of them. No citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth or any of them be subject to any disability, liability, restriction or condition with regard to access to shops, public restaurants, hotels and places of public entertainment, or the use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads and places of public resort maintained wholly or partly out of state funds or dedicated to the use of the general public. According to Article 16, there shall be equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office under the state. No citizen shall, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence, or any of them, be ineligible for or discriminated against in respect of any employment or office under the state. Given the immense diversity of Indian society, avoiding discriminations is a major concern in Indian constitutional law. India's overall legal tradition has a common law basis inspired by English law, combined with elements rooted in religious law traditions. Areas such as contract law, corporate law, penal law, and procedural law are based on English common law. India also has Western-style legislation protecting intellectual property rights, such as patents, copyright, industrial design, and registered trademarks. In contrast, so-called personal law issues, namely family law and inheritance law, are governed by religious law traditions, and they are different for different religious communities. There is, for example, a Hindu marriage law applying to Hindus, as well as Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs, whereas Muslims are placed under Islamic marriage law and Christians under Christian marriage law, with the respective legislation mostly going back to colonial times. A characteristic part of the Indian legal system are also regulations that are aimed at granting special rights to backward classes of people, so-called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in a view to reduce social inequalities related to the caste structure of Indian society. Such policies apply more specifically to university education and to employment with the state. They consist mainly in reserving fixed proportions of study places at universities and of government jobs for members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The Constitution expressly allows for such measures. As far as law enforcement is concerned, India has an independent judiciary with the Supreme Court of India at its head. The well-established judiciary features English-style courts with highly qualified judges. What is more is that most of these courts, especially the higher instances, are working in English. They use English as court language, which is a considerable advantage for foreigners. Much of the legal work in India can be done in English. However, the problem is that Indian courts are understaffed. There are not enough judges to deal with large caseloads, which is why courts face huge backlogs, resulting in very long proceedings. Litigation easily takes many years in India. One way to deal with this issue is to have arbitration clauses in your contracts with Indian business partners. Providing for arbitration helps to avoid being stuck in litigation before Indian state courts for years in case a dispute arises out of the contract.
Let me now move on to the cosmological and anthropological foundations of classical Indian legal thinking and social philosophy. Classical Indian worldview and the classical Indian understanding of the nature and destiny of human beings are rooted in Hinduism, India's majority religion, even though much of it is shared by other communities as well, namely Buddhists, Jains, and Sikhs. Originally, Hinduism is not an Indian term. It's a term that has been coined by foreigners. The ancient Persians and Greeks used the word Hindu to refer to people living beyond the Indus or Sindhu River, called Hindu River in Greek. The same geographical name was later adopted by the Arabs, the Mongols, and the British. Hinduism appeared in 18th century English as a term for religious, philosophical, and cultural traditions of Indian origin. Hindus themselves prefer to refer to their religion as Dharma or Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. Hinduism is very diverse in itself. It encompasses very different branches that all have their own views, doctrines, gods and goddesses and practices. The internal diversity is much greater than in other world religions. In a 1995 judgment, the Supreme Court of India made this statement about Hinduism. When we think of the Hindu religion, we find it difficult, if not impossible, to define Hindu religion or even adequately describe it. Unlike other religions in the world, the Hindu religion does not claim any one prophet. It does not worship any one god. It does not subscribe to any one dogma. It does not believe in any one philosophic concept. It does not follow any one set of religious rites or performances. In fact, it does not appear to satisfy the narrow traditional features of any religion or creed. In fact, Hinduism is a whole bunch of very different communities that worship a wide variety of deities. Some say that there are millions of deities in Hinduism.
To give you an idea of this diversity, I invite you to watch this National Geographic report on the Kani Mata temple in Rajasthan. It may not be a typical Indian temple, in fact it's quite exceptional, but what is typical is that you will find something like this probably only in India.